Welcome to the Valley Today, a public service presentation of KAIL-TV. The Central California SPCA continues the great work they've done in our community by providing services for animals neglected and abused. Beth Caffrey, Director of Community Relations for CCSPCA and an animal lover herself, gives us insight into the new relationships with the city and county of Fresno. Central California SPCA up next on the Valley Today. And welcome to the Valley Today. We are with Beth Caffrey here at the CCSPCA, Central California Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And thanks for being on our show.
Oh, well, glad to be here.
And now it's a new deal. The deal has changed with animal control services for the county and the city. And could you briefly explain how you guys are factored into that now?
Well, what it is that we used to service both the city and the county, and so we contracted with them for full animal control services, which encompasses a lot of items. So what happened was that there was a split. We now only do those service providing for the city of Fresno, not the county of Fresno. So the easiest way for people to understand is the difference between the police department and the sheriff's department.
Right.
Is who are you going to call in an emergency? Fresno has so many county islands within the city that it gets very confusing as to who would be your service responder. So if you think about it that way, if you had to call for emergency services, if you would call the police department for the city of Fresno, then you would call the SPCA for animal control services. And if you live in the county or in County Island and you would call the sheriff's department for emergencies, for animal emergencies now, you would call Liberty Animal Services.
And I'm sure people still screw that up, but you know, whoever they call, whether it be Liberty Animal or they call the CCSPCA, you guys can direct them to the proper agency and who will respond.
Right.
Okay, and for people that want to, you know, let's just get this out of the way. For people that want to contact the Central California SPCA, what's your number here?
It's 233-SPCA, which is 233-7722.
Yeah.
And we will continue to be a resource center. So if you do have questions or problems or anything, you can call us. And we will try to address as much as we possibly can. And then we can let you know who would be a service provider if somebody needs to come out.
And on the internet at ccspca.com?
That's right.
Okay, so that's
Lots
easy.
of valuable information on our website.
Right, so just go to that and then people can determine what's going on. Now, I think Liberty is only handling vicious dogs at this point, but traditionally you guys have handled any animal, right? I mean, if there was a problems with even the horses that have been malnourished and not taken care of, you guys have helped with that, right?
Right, we handle all animals, and there's wildlife, alligators, anything that you can imagine.
Alligators?
Alligators, believe it or not, we've had to go out and we've taken one out of a canal. We've had to get them out of backyards. So our officers, in their respond area, handle all animals.
Yeah.
What we will continue to do, even within the county of Fresno, is cruelty investigations.
Okay.
So if you have starving horses, or if you have an animal that is unfortunately suffering at the hands of somebody else, you would still call us, because that would be a cruelty investigation. And because we have humane officers, we would respond to that.
And that's really been, that's come to light in the last couple of years, or a lot of these horses that have been neglected, and that's tragic.
It is very tragic. The economy hit the cats and the dogs, of course, first.
Right.
They're a lot more upfront. They're talked about more often. Horses, livestock, large animals that are on farms and ranches, you know, it took a little bit longer to hit them. Foreclosures took a little bit longer. And then, of course, when you have animal abandonment, people don't really even realize it when you're out in the rural areas.
Yeah.
So that's where it makes it a little bit more difficult for our large animals.
So you guys have been dealing with livestock also on a...
Well, we don't bring in livestock or anything else, but if they're not being cared for, then of course we go through the proper channels to make sure that those animals are going to be provided for or are going to be removed.
And you're dialed into some of these rescue organizations also, right? Where they can help you also, like Cat House, like Linnea Latunzio, Cat House on the Kings, and these other organizations. And how are they faring?
Well, it's difficult because you have such a heavy concentration of animals here in the Central Valley.
Yeah.
We have not done what a lot of other communities have done, which is very active spaying and neutering.
You're right. And that is key.
That is key. And whether a lot of combinations are different, it can be through legislation, it can be through funding, it can be through a combination of both. But about 20 years ago, a lot of these communities have actually started doing that. So now they've seen a reduction in the amount of animals that have no home for one reason or another. So they're able to rehome those animals a lot easier.
Yeah.
We don't have that in the Central Valley yet. We're not there yet. We can get there if we start now, especially on high volume, lots and lots of spaying and neutering. But we've got to fund it because we also have a high unemployment rate. So it's hard for citizens to actually be able to pay for things that they would like to do.
Right.
They can't afford it.
They just can't afford it.
Right.
So when it comes down to the crunching the numbers, and the animals are the first to feel the pain.
Exactly. And we actually our biggest goal is to try and get animals out of the Central Valley to other states.
So you've really got a big range.
We do. We've gone all the way to Canada.
No kidding.
Yes. Arizona, any other state that we possibly can. We've sent a few to New York. So we'll send them anywhere that they can be rehomed, taken care of, and where they don't have the heavy population that we do.
Yeah. And I guess part of the fallout with the city was you guys were just tired of euthanizing animals, right?
Well, it's certainly euthanizing animals. It's also those resources to be able to do what you want to do for those animals.
Right.
Healthy adoptable animals should have the chance to, if they can't get adopted here in the Central Valley, to go somewhere else.
Right.
And like you mentioned, the local rescues, they do a fabulous job, but they're overburdened as well.
Right.
So they couldn't take those animals from us. And then transportation, all of the things that you need to do the right thing for the animals costs money.
Yeah.
And so we kept getting into that pinch of where we're getting stretched thinner and thinner and thinner.
Right.
And we're being asked to provide more and more services. And we felt that we're not doing what we could proactively to reduce the population.
And you were getting away from the mission statement, which was the Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So
right, the main core of the SPCA side of us, which is that high volume spaying and neutering,
right.
that education. That even takes funding. You need to be able to get to those schools, to get to those groups, to speak with them, to teach them about what the animals' needs are, about spaying and neutering, and we were having to slip on those things because then we were trying to go after more adoption events. So all of the SPCA side of us was kind of, again, getting stretched thinner and thinner because of that heavy population coming in through our doors. So we were dealing with this huge flood,
yeah,
a bucket at a time.
Right.
And what we're looking at is that we would much rather build a really secure dam and be able to find a place for those animals or prevent those animals from having to be born in the first place,
right.
to then have to find a home.
Yeah, the numbers were staggering for a breeding pair of cats for 1 year.
It is. It's very
something
staggering.
else. I mean, you look at a male and a female cat, and conceivably they can end up with what, 2,000 to 4,000 animals at the end of the year?
Right, because they can all reproduce.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that we're trying to educate people on is that now we also have this beautiful weather here in Fresno.
Right.
We don't freeze, snow, have all those conditions.
Right. We don't have the 4 seasons like Montana or
right. And those animals wouldn't survive in the wintertime, so they don't reproduce in the wintertime.
Sure.
For us, they do reproduce.
Oh, really? So because the seasons are so mild here, then they have more opportunity.
Right.
Wow.
They have lots more opportunity.
I never thought of that.
Oh, yes. So we see a cat that can have 4 litters in 1 year.
Yeah.
Whereas in seasonal weather, maybe a litter, 2 maybe, if they start in early spring and they're not altered. So, I mean, again, there's huge information that needs to get out to the general public.
Yeah.
Males can find females up to 5 miles away. So if you're not going to alter your boy because you
they're
can't
working
have a
the
litter,
program.
right, then
Yeah.
they're going to find all of those unaltered females in a 5-mile radius. Well, that's, I mean, again, huge population explosion.
Yeah. We're almost to the end of 2012. What were the numbers for I know that you've got the numbers for 2011. What was the amount of animals that you guys dealt with for last year?
Well, we're probably going to see a huge reduction because as of the beginning of October, there was that change, that shift.
Yeah, you're not handling a lot of the county, any of the county stuff anymore.
Right, and so I don't have the current numbers of what we're at. We were at about 49,000 in the previous year.
Wow.
So we're probably still going to be relatively high, but we know that we've seen about a 36% drop in intake. Mm-hmm. So the other misinformation that's out there is that we are no longer taking cats, mm-hmm. but we still are taking cats. Mm-hmm. But if you go into our stray cattery right now, you'll see lots of empty cages.
Oh, okay.
So that's the other thing is that there's, again, huge debates all over on that about cats, what they need, what they should get. And again, the basics are if we started the preventative would be spaying and neutering, because then we would have less to have to deal with.
Yeah. Now, how about your funding? I know that you've lost some of the funding from the county.
We did. That would be, we have had a shift now because we're still working with the city, and that's still being finalized right now. We don't have that final agreement with them just yet. So we are looking to.
So that's temporary also.
That's temporary also.
Yeah.
So we are looking to the community. We are looking to grants to help us with funding so that we can get those vital prevention programs stronger, running at a higher pace so that we can do more on that side of the.
Are you guys going out to schools, grade schools, and trying to educate kids?
We do. We have free programs that we take out to kids. Our highest priority is also dog bite prevention.
Right.
We have one of the highest bite rates here in the Central Valley.
Is that because of our culture, this local culture, and people like pit bulls or a certain type of animal?
It's not breed specific.
Okay.
That's another misconception.
Okay.
We do have a high volume of pit bulls. So because of that high volume, you may see that, when you do look at a bite, yes, it could be a pit bull.
Right.
But it's also shepherds, dachshunds, chihuahuas. I mean, we have high bite rate of all sorts of different breeds.
Okay, so it's not breed specific.
It's not breed specific.
Okay.
It's the fact that that children aren't educated enough on how to stay safe, how to prevent those kind of things, how to report it. We hear all the time from adults that they don't report bites when we have an animal that perpetuates that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So there's a lot of, you don't get some of the reporting that would give you better stats.
That's right.
Yeah. I've met some nice pit bulls too.
Yes, we have fabulous. We have one right now.
Yeah,
she smiles for you.
They're sweethearts. I think it's their environment and what people intend to do with them.
Right.
Rather than the animal itself.
It is, and that's the thing that we need to educate on as well, is that we can, teach animals, and we can certainly deal with them in a much better way. We have a free dog training class here, for example. That's part of our pet retention program, so that people can learn how to work with their animal, keep them in their home, but also work with those issues that they may have if that animal, is worried when visitors come over. Whatever it is that you have to deal with, we'll help you with it.
Yeah. We are with Beth Caffrey here at the CCSPCA, Central California Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in the cattery.
Yes. Very excited to have our new cattery expanded the way that it is. It gives more room, it gives more of that feeling of home and relaxed, coming from old shelters where it was more felt like it was warehousing animals, more cages, so it was a little bit depressing and a little bit hard and overwhelming for people, because when you're looking at so many animals, it's hard to make that lifelong decision about who's going to be a really good fit for you.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier that you've got an acquaintance room where you could get a cat out of a cage and kind of spend a little time with it in private and see if the cat is copacetic.
Right, because you have kitty cats that are kind of that wild behavior. They're all very active. And then you have those that are like private investigators where they want to hide a little bit.
Yeah.
So you can kind of really see that personality, so it's going to be a really good fit. So that animal's going to go home one time, which is our goal, versus going home and then getting returned.
Do you get a lot of animals that come back because they're not a good fit?
Because they're not a good fit.
Right.
A lot of times it has to do with people didn't really think about it. When they're very young, you have training involved. And if you have work and a lot of things going on in your life, it's hard to do that training at home.
Yeah.
But we offer help with that too.
Seems like cats are pretty self-sufficient. I mean, you can kind of leave a cat alone as long as it's got a litter box and water and some food. You can, basically let it do its own thing, right?
And that's the neat thing about cats, is that they're a really good adoption choice for people that are very busy and have a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
But you do have personality differences. So you do have kitties that like to meow a lot. We have one here in the cattery today who is meowing quite a bit. And then you have those quieter kitties. So it just depends. It's really good for adopters to really think about what's going to be a good fit for you and what's going to enrich your life.
Yeah, and you have you wanted to stress adoption services,
Yes.
and could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's very important to adopt because when you adopt, those animals are already spayed and neutered, they're microchipped, so they can be ID'd if they ever get lost or anything happens. They can go home to you that way. They've at least had one set of vaccines. You get to have a health checkup. So there's a lot of things that go into it so that this can be really good for your family when you adopt and have all those things done. It's also a responsibility level that not only adults, but certainly children will learn from. When you get those free puppies or kittens from the grocery store, you're kind of perpetuating the problem because most likely the adult is not altered. Now you're taking home an unaltered animal.
Right.
So, and then you don't know what kind of disease prevention you've had.
Yeah.
So on health levels, on so many levels, it's really important to adopt.
You're rolling the dice when you're getting an animal in front of a supermarket.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that when you buy animals from breeders, that's another equation that we have here. We get purebreds. One of the biggest misconceptions is that we don't get purebred animals. We do, all breeds, whether it's cats, dogs, or anything else. So you can let us know what breed you're looking for. And then again, you're not really adding to that overpopulation problem that we have here.
Now, have you gotten a flood of cats this year?
We always get floods of cats. We've actually, unfortunately, seen a little bit of a drop-off because people think that we're not taking cats anymore.
Now, so why is that?
Well, because it was part of that split. When we split with the city and the county, part of the talk was that the new look for animal control for the county and then possibly even for the city in the future is that they wouldn't take cats in the traditional method, meaning that people couldn't just get them, trap them, turn them in. There are a lot of new methods that are being looked at for cats, and that's certainly a direction that we want to go in. But we do still want to make sure that they have all of their health needs met and that they are not reproducing out there.
And you are still supplying services for the city as far as picking up animals that are a nuisance, right?
Right, we are. So if it's an issue, whatever it is for the city, we're still doing all of the same service levels that we were doing before.
And what was the number again for people to call if they have a question?
If they have a question, it's 233-SPCA or 233-7722.
And CCSPCA.com if they want to get on the internet. What other animals do you have here? What's your most interesting animal that you have here right now?
Well, I'd have to double check. It's probably going to be a snake. But we do get bearded dragons. We get iguanas. We get all of the.
Do people let these go too? They
do. A lot of times people will just let them go. Pot-bellied pigs, when they were really popular, we were seeing a lot of those come in as strays. And then it depends. Sometimes it's just because it's a moving situation or other reasons why they can no longer provide for that animal, so they will surrender them to us.
I could see if somebody's moving and they let the dog or the cat out and they're moving and the dog doesn't respond or the cat just disappears. I can see that, but other animals too? Other animals
too. You'd be surprised. Snakes. A lot of these animals that are kind of more on the exotic end or even pocket pets, they can be an expense, and especially things like snakes. Any animal that's going to grow in size is going to continue to need more resources to keep them fed and everything else. People don't realize how that expense grows. You know, when they get a small snake, it's pretty inexpensive, but then as it grows, and especially if you have a python or something really big, then they can't handle that anymore. Right, and of course the bigger the animal, the bigger the feeding needs. Right. And then you have other pets like chinchillas, for example. We do get chinchillas in here as well. Really? And chinchillas are those a pet? A lot. Yes, they are. I thought they were raised for. I thought they were raised for their fur. Well, in certain areas they are. And here in our area, they do. They are sold in pet stores, so people do take them home as pets. Same thing as rats. Everybody has a different kind of a view of rats, but we have lots of pet rats that do get surrendered here as well. Actually, rats are a pretty sweet creature. Right. So and that's the thing, is that everybody's in a little bit of a different perspective when it comes to animals, but that's part of what we do, is that we handle all animals. Now, those that are wildlife would go to wildlife rescue. If they are animals that they get healthy and they can be released, if that's the case, say like with a mallard or something, a duck, then we would re-release them once they're fine to go. And then if they are a pet, then we would adopt them into a new home. You mentioned that you saw some rabbits getting adopted when you came in. So we will adopt anything into a new home that's healthy and can go. And so anything that's ingested here, any animal that comes in, the vet looks it over and gives it a health assessment? Right. We do have our veterinary staff that comes out to the shelter. They do an assessment on the animals before they go up for adoption. When those animals go back to get spayed and neutered, then they get another assessment before they go through that surgery. So typically, if a person wanted to come in and either adopt a cat or a dog, they're going to get their health assessed. They're going to get shots, and they're going to get chipped. Right. And typically, what does that cost for a person to want to come in and adopt an animal? Well, our fees change. Because a lot of times what we try to do is go out and get donations so that we can reduce our adoption fees. But for right now, what we have is that it's $160 to adopt an adult dog. For a senior dog, it's Adopt a Senior Month, for example. All month of November, we focus on our senior animals. It's going to be $120. And that includes that spay, neuter, microchip license, first set of shots, deworming, health checkup. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is that you do have to carry on their health care.
Right.
So if you get a puppy or a kitten, for example, they need a series of 4 sets of shots typically. So depending on where they're at within our system, you will have to continue that.
How good are people with keeping up on the shots once they take an animal out of here?
A lot of our adopters are very good.
Yeah.
Really excellent with it. With our seniors, for example, one of the things that we see is that then the animals are now into the point of where they're going to need dentals. And we see a lot of adopters that are willing to do that. They're willing to go that extra mile.
You mean pull a tooth or?
Clean their teeth, sometimes pull a tooth. They're just like humans, you know, as you get a little bit older, you may have a little bit more that's going to have to be looked at or taken care of.
Yeah.
And so we do see a lot of adopters that take really good care of their animals. Some adopters choose not to, but we certainly always encourage them to. Another thing about adoptions to keep in mind is that we're kind of like when kids go to school and they can pick up a cold, whatever's going around at that moment, it's the same thing for animals. We are still a shelter, so we do see things like kennel cough, URI. That's part of the reason why we vaccinate upon entry, but those things do still happen. And so that's the part that adopters also have to understand, is that you're now just like a human child.
Right.
You now have an animal that you will have to provide for.
When you have an animal that comes in, I suppose that it probably goes into quarantine for a while, right?
We're not set up for that just yet.
Oh, really?
No. What happens is that they do get a health assessment, but we don't have individual quarantine areas. That's our kind of apple pie in the sky in the future. A lot of organizations that have had really big funding have been able to do that. So they build individual areas that they can quarantine those animals. Now, we do have quarantine for different reasons. Dog bites, animals that are in investigations.
Ones that you would suspect that would have rabies, for instance.
Yeah, for different reasons we do quarantine those animals. And then we do have animals in areas where they're being treated for health issues that are away from the general population.
Okay. And so how is the donation thing going?
Well, we could always use more.
Yeah.
So it's going okay. It's a little confusing again for people because they don't really understand what's going on.
Yeah.
One of the biggest questions we got was, are you still open? And we said, yes, certainly we are.
So they would think that the SPCA was going to close just because you had a separation from the county of Fresno?
Right. They thought we were going to close. They thought we moved because there was all that talk about where the other animal controls would be at.
Right. Very confusing.
Very confusing.
Right. So for the county, it's Liberty, and for you guys, for the city, it's the CCSPCA,
And so, but we still do appreciate donations. We had some donations come in today for blankets and things like that to keep the animals comfy and warm during the cooler season. We do still actively seek donations for our bigger issues like the horses because their feed is so very expensive.
Yeah. Hay has gone up.
Hay has gone up quite a bit.
Well, everything's gone up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, all the medical care for the animals has gone up too. So donations are really greatly appreciated, and we could certainly use more. And you can specify if you really want to put it towards like our Spay Neuter program or our foster program. That's something else that you can do.
How has volunteerism been with you guys?
Volunteering is really good.
Yeah.
We really love having volunteers. We've been at oddly enough, we've been revamping our volunteer program at the same time that we've had this kind of a switchover. So it's been a little bit harder for certain volunteers to get in, but that's growing. In other words, what we're trying to do is set up a better program so that we can support them. But volunteers are key to us. They actually started this organization. They're very vital. They help us go do things off-site, off-campus, go help us do off-site adoptions, programs that will really go out to the community. So we always need volunteers. Are you doing that
every weekend? You're taking animals out and
we do.
Trying to adopt them? And typically, where do you guys go to?
Well, we go to PetSmart.
Okay.
So the PetSmarts have great programs. We do a couple of programs with them. One is our 7-day-a-week cat program. So we take kitties out to cages that they have provided, and those kitties stay there until they find a home there.
Oh, great.
Which is very nice.
Yeah, so that clears out some space for you guys here.
It does. It helps us with that juggling act because that's what we constantly do. And then for dogs, we go out on Saturdays to PetSmart. We do have a new mobile unit that we take out, which has 43 cages in it. We just did the Pooch Parade in the Tower District.
And we saw you at the, I visited you guys at the Fresno Fair.
Right. Yeah. And we had our big booth at the Fresno Fair.
That was very nice.
We sent about, I think, 55, 60 animals home from the fair.
Oh, good.
So we love to be mobile because that's the other thing that we see with adoptions is that it really increases when we get out to the public and where they're at.
Right. So you need food, you need money. Money is probably the easiest thing to deal with because then you can put it towards what you want.
Right.
Blankets. And volunteers.
Right.
And the phone number again is?
233-SPCA, 233-7722.
7722 or CCSPCA.com.
Right, and you can like us on Facebook. We have a new spay neuter program. It's called Hip Snip Hooray.
Hi, Pa.
Yes, hi, Paws. And the Hip Snip Hooray program is a little bit different than our Spay Fresno. In other words, it's open to the general public.
Okay.
Our program before, you had to financially qualify. This one you don't. It's those rates are a flat rate for anyone to take advantage of. So our hospital is going into high volume spay neuter so that they can do that for the community at a really low cost.